Basically, he agrees with Marx that it's the property or lack of property which defines class situation. Yeah, those are the basic categories. Okay, but he's offering us more detail about each part or each of those two categories, because he says it depends on the kind of property and the kind of services. I can also say here skills, okay, rather than services. It depends on the kind of property or the kind of services that you have to offer or to sell in the market, what class situation you are in. Okay, so these are subtypes, you know, much more nuanced categories. If you want to read that part with me, this is also on page 168 in the right-hand column. He writes, within these categories, however, class situations are further differentiated on the one hand, according to the kind of property that is usable for returns, and on the other hand, according to the kind of services that can be offered in the market. Ownership of dwellings, so houses, if you own apartments, workshops, warehouses, stores, agriculturally usable land in large or small holdings, quantitative difference with possibly qualitative consequences, ownership of mines, cattle, men, slaves, disposition over mobile instruments of production or capital goods of all sorts, especially money or objects that can easily be exchanged for money, etc., etc. All these distinctions differentiate the class situations of the property, just as does the meaning which they can give to the use of property, especially to property which has money equivalents. Accordingly, the propertied, for instance, may belong to the class of rentiers. Another basic distinction that he offers. Rentiers, or the class of entrepreneurs. Okay, so there are all different types of property that determine what meaning property has for your life chances. You know, what life chances you can draw from them. Rentiers, for example, are those that draw their income, say, in the contemporary period of capital gains. If you have a lot of capital to invest in the stock market, you get capital gains, you gain interest. You know, so your money is working for you without you doing anything. Entrepreneurs, just think of the two guys who founded Google. Okay? Initially they were entrepreneurs. Based on an idea, they created a new business. So they actively work with capital in order to multiply it through investment, active investment. Of course, by now Google is a publicly traded company, so if you early on bought stocks in Google, you could be a rentier now. No? And he makes that a similar distinction for the kinds of skills that you can offer in the market. Okay? So what this tells us all together, and Weber emphasizes that very much, that class situation is market situation. Yeah? A class is not a group. Okay? This is very important. A class is not a group, or not necessarily a group. Okay? If you go back to the first definition of class, before the section I read, or continue in the very beginning of the section B, determination of class situation by market situation. In our terminology, classes are not communities. They merely represent possible and frequent basis for social action. Yeah? They're only a possible. Class situation is only a possible basis, but not a necessary basis. Yeah? Not necessarily. It's not necessarily the case that people come together and form a group because they are in the same class situation, they have the same class interests. Yeah? This is the first big difference to Marx. Marx assumes that if you are in a particular class situation, you share interests with others and you will organize based on these common interests. Yeah? Weber emphasizes that class situation is only a possible basis for social action. And frequently it is. Frequently people do come together, even across different class interests, to create social action. But we should not confuse those two with each other. Class is not a group. Okay? And Weber in this context also points out that, for example, slaves are not a class. Yes, slaves offer by force their services. They have to work for their slave master, but they do not offer those services in a market. They don't offer it freely in a market for sale. Yeah? They do it by force. So slaves are not a class. Okay? They are a status group, and their position is not simply determined by the operation of markets, but by other factors. Okay, so we can understand this issue of social action and class as not being a group better when we come now next to the issue of class struggle.